Okay. So a block is, I think, all you're gonna need. You might have a second one close by just in case. You might have a strap just in case, but I'm pretty sure that all you're gonna need is a block. So internal, external rotation. We've done flexion and extension at the where the leg bone is in the hip socket. That's kind of in that front, that sagittal plane moving forward and back. Then last week we did abduction and adduction, which is that frontal plane where the leg moves in and out. The last is internal external rotation, where the leg bone kind of rotates inside the hip socket. We'll do a little bit at the beginning to kind of highlight those and to kind of highlight the muscles that cause that rotation inside the joint. But most of what we're going to be doing is working on, it's kind of a traditional kettlebell exercise. We don't have kettlebells, and we're doing it more for mobility and stability. So we're not going to use kettlebell, we're use our block, but the get up. So we're going to start to kind of move with the movements that we put together to get up. And this is what we've talked about this before, but this is what, you know, as you move from that infant toddler stage and you start to move around and up, that's kind of what happens is we get up. So we're combining all of the things, including the feet, the hip, the knee, to move towards getting up off the floor. So with that, we're gonna have our block close by and come down onto our backs. I did not mute you, so I will do that very quickly. We're gonna come on to our backs and we will start lying flat. So kind of tree pose, or not tree pose, Tadasana, mountain pose on your backs. So arms down beside your body, palms down. And just begin by allowing the legs to rest comfortably open. Chin tucked, neck long, collarbones wide. Just start to take this moment to allow for transition from the events of your day into this space and time right now. So scanning the body, looking for areas of tension or gripping. And just use the breath to bring awareness into any place throughout your body that you may feel that tension and gripping. And use the exhalations as a reminder to soften, to release, to let go. And take a moment to move deeper into the breath. Noticing first, are you breathing in and out through your nostrils? And then noticing where in your body your breath moves automatically. Do you feel it in the belly? And if you feel it in the belly, do you feel it in the lower part of your belly, the mid belly, or the upper belly right below the rib cage? If you feel it in your upper body, notice where in your chest you feel it. And then bring the heels of your hands to rest on the sides of your rib cage. So elbows move away from the body as you wrap your hands on the bottom of the rib cage, heels of the hands on the outside of the rib cage. Wherever you are in your breath, exhale your breath out. And then inhale for a count of 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Continue this breath with the exhalation being at least 2 counts longer than your inhalation, if not double the length of your inhalation. So if you count for a count of 4 on your inhalation, can you exhale for a count of 6 or perhaps 8? And if that inhalation is too much, you can allow the inhalation to go to 3, and then your exhalation to be 5 or 6, or 4 or 6. And as you move into the space of expanding the length of the breath, notice if you can consciously move your breath into the heels of your hands so that your rib cage expands outward, making room for the diaphragm to contract and move downward towards your belly. All along, breathing in and out through your nose, and not trying to make the breath necessarily big or wide, just slow, quiet, and relaxed. So if you feel as if you're over-efforting to make the breath longer, opt to keep the breath quiet, light, and low, and just make it slightly shorter. As we move into the space of connecting mind, body, and breath, just notice how your mind has shifted, how your body has shifted, as your awareness has shifted to creating this light, low, and slow breath. And bring the arms back down beside your body, and bend both of your knees. Rest your knees in towards each other. So when the knees rest in towards each other, the legs are in slight internal rotation. So just notice how it feels, feet wide, knees in. Notice how it feels deep within your hip socket. And take a few of these low, slow, and light breaths, with the exhalation being slightly longer. And if you feel, you can walk your feet a little wider and allow for more of that internal rotation, as long as your knees rest together. So as we move into internal and external rotation, I'm just going to put this out here as kind of a precursor to the class. If you have had hip replacement, it is advised that you don't go deep into internal rotation. So maybe work more towards neutral rather than deepening the internal rotation. And then slowly walk the soles of your feet towards each other. Bring the inner edges of your feet towards each other, and then allow your knees to open wide. So moving now into external rotation. In yoga, we call this Supta Baddha Konasana. You can also call it reclined butterfly pose. The legs open like a butterfly. And again, just take a few breaths here. Kind of feeling into each separate hip socket, noticing kind of what's going on in each hip. And then bring the legs, the feet back to the floor. Left leg is going to stay, or right leg is going to stay on the ground. Have your block off to the left side of your mat. So right foot stays on the ground. Bend the left knee in towards your chest. Reach your left hand inside of your left knee. You're going to reach and grab the outer edge of your left foot. So if you know the pose happy baby, you can think of this as half happy baby. So ankle is dorsiflexed strongly. So notice the tendency to sickle the foot in or push the foot out, and try to keep your toes, your second and third toe, in line with your shin bone. Press down through your right foot enough to go all the way over so that the top of your left thigh rests on the floor. So your right hip is going to be off the ground. Fingers are wrapped around the pinky edge of your left foot. Keep drawing the toes towards the shin, keeping the second and third toe in line with your shin bone. And then start to press the outer edge of your pinky foot into your fingers and slide your knee down towards, so that it's underneath your heel. So basically you're taking this foot more into external rotation. Try to keep your right shoulder on the ground, but your right hip will be off the ground. So continue to keep your ankle flexed, but pull your foot more towards your head as you push your knee away from your head. So just kind of playing with that range of external rotation in your hip socket. It should be comfortable, so don't force it into a place that you feel is uncomfortable. And again, move back into that exhalation being twice as long as your inhalation. So move back into the breath as you kind of move into opening your left hip in external rotation. So ankle, heel is below your knee. So if your heel is pulling in towards your sit bone, see if you can take it to where it's directly above your left knee. So your knee is bent at 90 degrees. And go ahead and kick your heel towards your hip. Now take the right hip down to the ground. Take your block and place it at the flattest level on the floor. You're going to come back to where now, instead of the knee being on the floor, it's going to be on the block. Right hip will come back up off the floor. Take your hand and again, position the heel so it's directly above your right knee. Pull the heel towards your head, keeping your second and third toe in line with your shin. So if you notice that your ankle's sickling in, try to find the ankle in neutral again. And then draw the heel as close to your head as you can, and then let go of the leg. So now we're asking the muscles, instead of our foot or our hand pulling our foot towards our head, we're now asking the muscles inside the hip to work in external rotation. So the toes are still in line with your shin. You can look. Heel is still above your knee, and you're pulling your heel slightly towards your head to find external rotation. Release. Pull the knee in towards your chest. Hug the knee towards your chest. Lift the right leg or the left leg above your hip, keeping your right knee bent. And just to kind of release, point and flex your toes. Rotate your ankle in one direction. Rotate your ankle in the other direction. Make sure your pelvis is in neutral. So if it helps to have your hands at the top of your pelvis, notice if one of your hips is higher than the other. And then keep your hands on your hips as you make circles with your leg in one direction. So the entire leg is moving inside the hip socket. This is kind of what we did last week. Abduction, abduction. Go in the other direction. Keep the movement in your pelvis minimal. So there might be slight rocking side to side, but don't move so much that you're creating a lot of movement. And then come back to where it's straight. And then just rotate the foot out. but the entire leg bone is moving. And then the toe, the knee, and the hip bone in. So now we're doing that rotation inside the hip socket. Keep your right foot on the floor, move it slightly closer to your hips, hands down beside your hips, press your hands into the floor, and then hip bridge. So lift your hips off the floor, pressing the heel of the left foot up towards the sky, lower the hips down. Press down through your right foot, lift your hips, pushing right foot, left foot up towards the sky, lower down. One more time, push, lower hips down, bend left knee in towards the chest, hug, let go of all the tension you feel in the hip. And then straighten the left leg down to the ground. Bend your right knee in towards your chest, and we're gonna roll onto our left side, and then now the right knee is gonna rest on the block. So left leg is straight, heel, hip, shoulder all in one line. You're resting your hand or your head in your hand. Right knee is bent at the hip 90 degrees and at the knee 90 degrees. Bring your right hand onto your hip. Keep your hip stacked. So notice if you're pushing your right knee forward, pull the hip back so the right hip is stuck directly on top of the left hip. And start to push the right heel up towards the sky. So this is internal rotation. Come back to neutral. And again, if you've had hip surgery, don't go so far. Just only go as far as you can comfortably. If it's creating any kind of pain in the outside of your hip or the groin, and this is only if you've had hip replacement. If you have not had hip replacement, this might be uncomfortable for you because internal rotation is hard. Next time you lift the foot up, stay up. Press the knee down into the block and see if you can lift the foot, the heel, a little bit higher. Notice the tendency to point the toes up and point them instead down towards the ground. So you're gonna feel a little activity in your outer hip. The more you press down into the block, you'll feel it in your inner thigh, maybe the inner groin. Find that two-part breath where your inhalation and exhalation, the exhalation is twice as long. Release the foot down, remove the block, and roll onto your back. This time, straightening right leg above your hip. Arms out to the side, T to the body. Turn your left leg out, so toes pointing out. Take your right arm across your chest. Slide it towards your left hand as you come onto your left side body. The right foot is going to push straight up towards the sky. Roll back onto your back and start to look at your right foot. We're going to do this a few more times. Notice if you can create no movement in the foot. So keep looking at your foot as you push the foot straight up towards the sky, roll onto your left side body. Keep looking at your foot. See how little movement you can move your foot as you roll back onto your back. So do this 2 more times. Roll onto your left side as you push the right foot straight up towards the sky. And roll back down.
Your right hip is coming off the ground, correct?
Right hip is coming off the ground. So you're rolling onto your left side. You're pushing your right foot straight up towards the sky. And you should feel your outer hip. So you're moving from a neutral position where you're lying on your back, your hip is in neutral. And as you roll onto your left side and you push the foot up, that right hip is moving into external rotation. Come back down, bring both legs to the ground, feet wide. Windshield wiper your knees side to side. So we've done completely different things to both hips. So hopefully they feel a little different at this point in time. So let's go ahead and bring them into neutral. So keep your left foot on the ground. Bend your right knee. Reach with your right hand inside your right knee and grab the outer edge of your foot. So again, we're going into kind of this half happy baby. Push your left foot in the floor in order to tilt yourself all the way over to the right. So much so that your right thigh rests on the floor. Your left hip will be off the floor. Hopefully you can keep your left shoulder on the ground, but if the left shoulder lifts up, that's not a big problem. And then turn to look to make sure that your second and third toe are aligned with your shin bone. Ankle is flexed. And then start to press the outer edge of your pinky foot into your hand as you kind of rotate your knee so that it's under your right ankle. So you're moving it into external rotation. So we're using the muscles of the outer hip, inner hip, to move the knee underneath the right heel. So that's going to move it into more of external rotation. It's going to take the knee further away from the shoulder. Find that breath where your exhalation is twice as long as your inhalation. So when we move into the breath, we actually make sure that we are breathing. Because sometimes when we hold things very intently as we are right now, we also hold the breath. So every time we come into something that we hold, we're moving into recognizing that we're still breathing. Go ahead and let go of the tension. Roll back onto your back. Hug your knee in towards your chest. And kind of give it a moment to let go. And then take your block. Place it on the right side of your mat. I'm going to do the left side again, or maybe I'll just turn around. So left foot continues to stay on the floor. Reach in, again, grab the outer edge of your pinky. This time you're taking your knee to the flat edge of your block. Make sure second and third toe are aligned with your shin again. And then pull your heel closer towards your shoulder as you press your knee down away from your shoulder. And then let go of your foot. You're kind of coming into a place now where you're asking the muscles to hold your leg in this external rotation. And notice if the heel starts to move away from the head, I'm going to push the heel a little bit more towards the head as you take the knee underneath the ankle. Let it go. Hug the knee in towards the chest. And then straighten, right leg directly above the hip. So just to give your hip a break, point and flex your toes. And then roll your ankle in one direction. Roll your ankle in the other direction. And then firm the thigh, pulling the toes towards the head. Hands on the pelvis, make sure your pelvis is in neutral as you start to make little circles inside the hip socket. So the whole leg makes a circle. The circle is very tiny at the top of the leg bone where it's in the hip socket, but the foot, go ahead and switch directions. The foot will make a bigger circle. Try to minimize how much movement is going on in your pelvis. And then bring it back into neutral. So heel, knee, and hip are all in one line. And now rotate the leg. So turning the toes out, which take the knees out, which take the leg bone out, and then in. And go back and forth between external and internal rotation. Again, having the movement be inside the hip socket instead of the pelvis moving up and down. So the pelvis is not moving at all when you do this. Bend the knee, hug the knee in towards the chest, letting again the tension go inside the right hip. And then straighten right leg long to the ground. Hug your left knee in towards your right shoulder and then roll onto your right side. So the block should be there for you. Bring your right heel, hip, and shoulder all in one line, supporting your head on your hand. And make sure that this left hip is stacked directly on top of the right hip. So you're not scooting forward. You're trying to keep it balanced, which is going to take a little bit more core activity. Take your left hand, place it on top of your hip. That just reminds you to keep your hip still as you try to move the leg in internal rotation. So the knee stays pressing on the block as you lift your left foot away from the floor. Notice the tendency to take the pinky up towards the sky and instead try to take the heel up towards the sky. So the pinky, the big toe points down as the heel pushes up. And doing this to where it's comfortable so you're not forcing anything. Next time you take the heel up, stay up. Keep left hip pulling down and stacked on top. So you're using the muscles of your outer hip, inner thigh to internally rotate the leg bone to lift the heel up towards the sky. And this can be really hard. Internal rotation can be really, really hard for some people. It's really hard for me, but you can tell I work on it. Release the foot. Roll onto your back and bring your left leg straight up above your hip. Arms out to the side, palms facing up. So right leg is long to the ground, left leg is straight up above your hip. Start to look at your left foot as you reach your left hand across your chest, reach it down the inside of your right arm, down to the palm, push your left foot up towards the sky. So when you're in this position, your heel, knee, and hip are all stacked. And then really external rotation. And then roll back. And do this a few times. So the more you think of pushing your foot up towards the sky, the more you're going to feel that action in your outer hip. And that outer hip is what pushes you onto the right side of your body. Outer edge of your right foot presses down into the floor as left foot pushes up towards the sky. So when we do the class on Friday, this is going to make more sense. But today, this is how we're playing with it. One more time, press up. Come onto your back. We forgot to do hip bridges, so bend your right knee. Hands down beside your hips. Left leg pressing up. Press down for your right foot, except for I think it's the other leg we need to do. So left foot down, right foot presses up. Press down through your left foot to lift your right leg. Lift the hips. Press up and down. 2 more times. Hug both knees in towards your chest. Take the knees wide, roll them down, in and up. So making circles with both legs in one direction. And then switching directions. And grab behind your knees and roll up. We're going to start with external rotation. Have a block close by, but we're going to start with just traditional Baddha Konasana or butterfly pose. So soles of the feet together. We'll do one hip at a time. We're going to take it through a couple of different things on both sides. We're going to start right knee. Take your right hand inside of your right knee, left hand behind your hip, and just press your knee towards the floor. So as you can see, I have a lot of external rotation. You may not. So you may be way up here. Don't force it, but just take it to whatever comfortable in range you have. So nothing's really going on in the right hip. It's more just a kind of testing your in range in your right hip. Should say nothing's going on in your left hip. Just kind of pushing down on your right inner thigh. and not forcing it. Kind of noticing where your range of motion is and going right to the edge of it. So this is kind of a little bit of a yin type thing. You're going to the edge, but you don't want to scream. You want to be able to breathe. And you can use that inhalation for a count of 3 or 4 and the exhalation of a count of 6 or 8. Kind of encourage more of a release. So now we're actually going to activate. So you're going to continue to keep your right hand inside of your right thigh, but this time you're actually going to push your hand and your knee together. So we're going the opposite direction. So you're creating tension now inside of your inner thigh. Let's try this with a block. So bring a block between your thighs or between your feet. Press the ball mount of your big toe and your inner heel into the block. And then again, push your hand and your knee together. Find that breath. So again, oftentimes when we effort, we forget to breathe. And you may have been like, oh yeah, I am forgetting to breathe. So now the knee is moving away from the floor. It's moving into your hands. You're creating an isometric contraction between the hand and the knee, which creates an isometric contraction inside of the muscles, mostly on your inner thigh. Now to do the opposite of that, you're going to try to push just the right knee towards the floor. So now we're using the outer hip muscle. So you might press the pinky edge of your right foot and heel into the block to get more of that activity in your outer hip, and keep trying to push the knee towards the floor. And it probably won't go as low as mine. External rotation was a superhero, I would be, or a superpower, I would be a superhero. It's not always a good thing. Make sure you're still breathing, and then release. Take the block out, bring the legs up, and just windshield wiper them side to side. We'll go to the other side. So start with feet just together. So right hand comes behind your hip. You can lean back. Take your left hand and just gently push the knee towards the floor. So you're going to your own personal in range. There's no goals. No one can see you. I can barely see you. Find that deep exhalation. The exhalation is where the release is. So the more you can find the longer exhale, hopefully the more it shows up in letting go. And notice as you push your leg down, where do you feel it in your hip? Because oftentimes we'll feel it in different places. I tend to feel it in the outside of my hip. This is actually stretching the inner groins. So for many of you, you may feel it in your inner groin. I feel nothing there. Let it go. Take your block, place it back between your feet. So as you press through mainly the big toe of your left foot and inner heel, that's going to start to engage your inner thigh muscles. So take your hand to your knee and start to lift your knee into your hands. You're not really doing anything with the right leg. So this is all left leg. And you may notice that your right leg is trying to help. So encourage it to stay soft as you push your left knee into your left hand. So you're creating an isometric contraction. You can find the big toe and the inner heel. And as you push those down, you might find that your inner thigh lights up a little bit more. So as we create contraction, we actually create awareness. And oftentimes we find more of a release. And so let it go. And now we're going the opposite way. So hand behind your hips, pressing the pinky edge of your foot and heel into the block as you try to push your left knee down towards the floor. So in this position, you should feel some outer hip engagement. Kind of asking the glutes to work. Make sure you're breathing. Every time I effort, I feel like I have to clench my jaws and really slow down my breath to the staccato breath. But if I breathe and relax, I can find a little bit more awareness. Let it go. Take the block out. And again, side to side. So that was external rotation. And that was, we are asking the muscles that control external rotation to work. So now we're going to do the same with internal rotation. This may be easier if your back is up against the wall. You know, if you don't have a wall close by, don't fret about it. I'm going to start with the feet wider than hip distance apart. And we'll do right leg first. Keep your sit bones on the ground. Take your left hand behind your hip and start to rotate your torso towards your left knee. You're going to take your right knee and drop it in. Again, this is internal rotation. So if you have had hip replacement, keep your knee and hip bone in line and just work it there. If you have not had hip replacement, you can take your knee in, add a little bit of pressure. If you feel it in your knee, try flexing your ankle. So you're just going to take it to its in range. Sit bones stay on the floor. And I don't have much internal rotation. Keep rotating right sit bone back towards the floor as you gently push your knee towards midline, or perhaps if you have great internal rotation, past that midline. I'm right at about midline. Notice if you're tensing, which I was, see if you can let it go, because this is our passive range. And then start to press the knee out into your hand. So now you're creating that isometric contraction as you try to push your hand and your knee together in internal rotation. Make sure you're still breathing. Let the hand go, and now bring both hands behind the hip, keep your ankle flexed, and try to take your knee further towards the floor. So now you're asking your internal rotators. And mine are not happy, so I'm going to stay in more of a neutral and just pretend as if I'm rolling my leg inward. So let it go. Let both of your knees fall to the right. So now you're coming into 90-90 position in both legs. If 90-90 is not possible, you can take this left knee or right knee slightly towards your right heel, left heel, right heel. But if you can bring your knee in line with your hip, heel in line with your knee, same thing here. Right knee in line with your hip, hip in line side with your knee. Bring your hands behind your head. Rotate your torso towards your right knee. Start to lean forward only to the degree that you can maintain this. So kind of hovering. You want to keep your hips in neutral, so if that left hip collapses forward, back out of the hold a little bit. Straighten your arms out to the side. Continue to hold. Take your arms behind your back. Take your arms wide. Take your arms behind your head. Take your arms out to the side. Take your arms behind your back. Take your arms out to the side. Take your arms behind your head. Bring the hands down to the floor on either side of your right knee, and now let it all go. So roll your belly out over your right thigh. Sternum is in line with your knee. You can either rest on your elbows, your hands, or perhaps stacking your hands and resting your forehead on your hands. Let the tension go inside your right hip. Let the tension go inside your left hip. Hands on either side of your right knee, press up and come back. Back into the bear position, heels wider than your hips, hands behind your hips. Start to twist slightly towards your right knee. Take your left hand and start to press your left knee in. Remember, toes stay in line with your shin, ankles flexed. Using the hand to move the knee towards the midline. So internal rotation, I'm mirroring you, I would say left side, but it's my right side. Internal rotation on my right side is way better than internal rotation on my left side. Keep sit bones on the floor. The left sit bone will lift slightly off the floor. But don't go so much that you press your knee towards the ground. You want to keep the hips back so that you can find kind of your in range of internal rotation. That 4 count, inhale, 8 count, exhale, if you can keep that. And then start to press your knee into your hand. So it's lifting up and out, but the hand is stopping it from lifting up and out.
Is this the same side or the second side?
It's the second side.
Hmm.
So it's your left side. I said right because it's my right side, and I was just making a point of saying I have better internal rotation on my right side, like markedly different. Let it go, and now bring both hands behind your hip as you start to try to press your knee down. And again, hip replacement, you're just working it in neutral. You're not forcing into internal rotation. You're pulling left sit bone back. And then to come out of it, let both knees go to the left. So knees in line with hips, heels in line with knees. Turn your torso towards your left knee. Right hip stays back. Bring your hands behind your head. And as you start to tilt forward, as if you were going to reach your belly out over your thigh, you start to notice that your left hip has to engage to hold you here. So only go as far as you can that you can maintain that left or right hip staying back. Find that same breath that we've been using. And bring the arms out to the side. Sweep them behind your back. Bring them up your back. Take them out to the side. Bring them behind your head. Sweep them out to the side. Bring them behind your back. So the torso is staying in that kind of halfway towards your thigh, maybe a quarter of the way towards your thigh. Right hip continues to pull back, keeping your pelvis more of a neutral. Next time you bring your hands up, stay up, and then bring the hands on either side of your left knee as you now roll the belly out over your left knee. So now you get to relax, letting the tension inside of the hip go. Bring the hands on either side of your knee, press up. And watch this, because once you get down, you're not going to be able to do it. You're not going to be able to see it. We're going to start to transition into the first part of the get up. So you're going to hold a block in your hand. First part is just lifting up onto your elbow. So you'll pull the elbow back as you lift up. Push the block up, and then the next step will go up, down, down, and then the next step, we'll lose the block, and we'll do some pelvis lifts. Then we'll go back to the block, and we'll do single arm pelvis lift. And then the next step, lift, knee comes back. And that's as far as we'll go. So, right knee bends, block in your right hand. Chin is tucked, neck is long, left hand is beside your body and up, slightly out to this side. So maybe 2 hand widths away from your thigh. Look up at your right hand. You're gonna push the hand into the block. And as you push up, you're gonna bend your left elbow and come up onto your elbow. So we're just gonna do this a few times. So press the hand up into the block as you lift up onto your left elbow and then come back down. Press the block up to lift up onto your left elbow, then come down. This time lift up onto your elbow, stay here. Slide the left hand back as you push the block up and come up into a full sit. Fingers point back. Turn the fingers forward, elbow, back. Push the block up, elbow, hand. Fingers forward, elbow, back. One more time, press the block up, elbow, hand. Take the block down. Both fingers point back. You're still on your right foot. Toe is slightly out. Left foot is slightly out. Press down through your right foot. Lift your hips and release down. So do this 3 more times. Press the right foot down to lift the hips and release down. Lift and release. One more time, lift, release. Block comes in your hand, right hand comes up, turn the fingers forward, elbow, back. So we're gonna do the same thing, but this time we'll do it one-handed. So press the right block up, come on your left elbow. Press the block up, come up onto your hand, fingers point back. Press down through your right foot, lift your hips, push the block up. Lower the hips, turn the fingers, elbow, back. Press the block up, fingers, lift, stay lifted, bring your left knee to the floor under your left hip. Push right block up, lift up. Hand to the floor. Bring your left leg long. So you're in this hip lift. Lower the hip. Lower the elbow. Lower down. One more time, all together. Push up. Hand. Bridge. Knee under hip. Lift up. Hand, lower leg, lower hip, elbow, shoulder. Let it go. Bring both knees in and twist side to side. All right, other side. So this time, block is in left hand. Left knee is bent, right leg is straight. Right hand comes slightly away from the body, palm down. Look at your left hand. And the effort comes from pushing the block up. That helps to engage the core. Come up onto your elbow, lower down. Push the block up, come up onto your elbow, lower down. Push, elbow, lower down. This time we're going to take it up. Push up, hand, fingers point back, fingers point in, elbow, lie down. Push up, elbow, fingers turn back, sit up, fingers forward, elbow down, back. One more time this way. Push up, hand, release the block. Both hands come behind you. So now we have two hands on the floor to do the hip lift. Press down through your left foot. Lift the hips. Lower the hips. Lift the hips. Lower the hips. Lift the hips. Lower the hips. Take your block back in your left hand. Right fingers forward. Elbow down. So we're going now to single leg. So push the block up with your left hand, elbow. Fingers point back, hand. Press down through your left foot, lift your hips. Block goes straight up towards the sky, not back. Lower the hips. Elbow, back. Press up, hand, press down, lift hips. Lower hips, elbow, down. Elbow, hand, hips, hips, elbow, back. This time we go up the next step. So press the block up, elbow, hand, lift the hips, take your right foot, place the right knee underneath your right hip, lift up. So we're on an external rotation in the left hip, internal rotation right. Lower the hand to the floor, come back into that hip bridge, or if you want to say wild thing, you can. Lower the hips, lower the elbow, lower onto your back. 2 more times. Elbow, hand, hips, knee, lift up, hand, leg long, lower hips, elbow, back. Last time, elbow, hand. You can be going in your own pace. Knee, press up, hand, leg, hips, elbow, back. Release the block. Step the feet, mat distance apart. Windshield wiper, knees side to side. So the get up, as far as the legs go, you may have felt that this is also some work on your wrists and your upper body. We need to work those things as well. But the get up takes all of the movements of the legs working in conjunction. Bring the knees in towards your chest. Rock a little side to side. Take your right foot to the ground, press the right foot into the ground, shift the hips slightly to the left. Cross, left leg over right, and then twist to the right. So this stretches the outer hip muscles. Release your right hand off of your right knee. Rotate back to center. Both feet to the ground. Shift the hips slightly to your right. Cross. Right leg over left. Grab the outer edge of your right knee with your left hand and twist to the left. Slow deep breaths. Noticing if you are able to still bring the breath deep into the lungs, finding that rib cage expansion. And if you cannot find expansion in the ribs, then untwist a little bit. Let it go. Hug both knees into your chest. Rock a little side to side. So you're still lying on your backs. I'm sitting up because I'm coughing and I can't lie down anymore. And try a happy baby. So reaching your arms between your knees, grabbing the outer edges of your knees, pressing the soles of your feet up towards the sky and your tailbone towards the floor. Knees are bent at 90 degrees, if that is possible. And then roll onto your bellies. So let your legs go, roll onto your bellies. Stack your palms or your hands one on top of the other, resting your forehead on your hands. Reach the elbows out to the side. Just take a few breaths here, feeling the breath expand, side ribs out. The back of the ribs widening. Feeling the space in your lower back expand with each breath. Tuck your toes under and widen your knees slightly, bending your knees. And then windshield wipering one shin in front of the other. So just crossing your shins one in front of the other. And bringing the pelvis back into a neutral, going between internal and external rotation here. And bring the hands underneath the shoulders, extend the legs, press up to hands and knees. Toes touch, knees wide, sit back into child's pose. Just kind of notice what your child's pose feels like at the end of class with all that hip work. When you are ready, slowly come up. Just kind of move in whatever way. If you want to sit on your knees and shift side to side, or legs long or up. Just kind of explore your hips. And then come to whatever comfortable seated position you want to find your way into. Close your eyes. Finding, once again, the breath low in the lungs, expanding lungs and ribs out to the side as you inhale. In and out through the nose. Breathing light, breathing low, breathing slow. Thank you so much for your time.